Rain slashed through the midnight sky like a furious painter gone mad, the forest shivering under the weight of the storm. Mud clawed at Nathaniel's expensive shoes as he stumbled through the thicket, the beam of his flashlight trembling in his grip. He was soaked to the bone, his tailored jacket clinging to him like guilt. Each breath tore through his chest, fueled by panic more than exhaustion. He pushed forward, eyes scanning the wet earth, heart thrumming with a single name, Lily. And then he saw her. Kneeling beneath a twisted pine, her arms wrapped protectively around a boy who whimpered in pain, his ankle bent at an unnatural angle. Lily's hair was plastered to her face, her jacket torn, her tiny frame trembling. But her eyes, those wide, blazing eyes, burned with something fierce. She looked up as the light found her, and when she saw her father, she didn't smile. Didn't cry. She whispered. "You came too late." Nathaniel froze. The words struck harder than the thunder rolling above. He dropped to his knees beside them, his arms automatically reaching to lift the boy. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Not when his daughter's words echoed in the cavern of his soul. The boy clung to him, and Lily rose to her feet, silent, following. The forest swallowed the sound of their footsteps as they made their way back. But inside Nathaniel, the storm had only just begun. 2 weeks earlier, Nathaniel Carter had been invincible. At least, that's what Forbes said. CEO of Carver Holdings. Mastermind of $3 billion acquisitions. A man whose phone never stopped vibrating and whose assistant never had enough post-it notes to track his meetings. He wore success like armor, gleaming, impenetrable, heavy. And Lily, his 12-year-old daughter, was the accessory that didn't quite match. She was quiet. Curious. A girl who liked dirt under her nails and books about constellations. She didn't fit the country clubs or the curated photo shoots he scheduled every holiday. Nathaniel tried to mold her. Private tutors. Mandarin lessons. A tennis coach who once trained a royal. But Lily, in her own quiet rebellion, kept looking up at the stars instead of the spreadsheets he left on the kitchen table. It had been a clerical error. One of those things his assistant would usually catch. Instead of booking Camp Swanwell, the elite summer retreat with spa-level cabins and nutritionist-designed menus, Lily's name had landed at Camp Ridgepine. Wilderness. Mud. No Wi-Fi. No chef. Just fire pits and the scent of pine and sweat. Nathaniel had planned to fix it with a phone call. But when they arrived, and Lily saw the ropes course and the canoes, she turned to him with eyes he hadn't seen shine in years. "Can I stay?" she had asked, her voice trembling not with fear, but hope. And for the first time in a long time, Nathaniel had hesitated. He stayed the first night in the town lodge, then the second. Told himself he was watching from afar. That he just wanted to ensure his daughter wasn't sleeping in a moldy cabin. But each morning, he found himself drawn back. Watching. Waiting. Wondering. Until Olivia happened. The camp director was nothing like the women Nathaniel knew. There was dirt on her jeans and a scar above her left brow. Her handshake was firm. Her laugh real. And she challenged him. Not by yelling, but by seeing straight through the shell he'd polished for years. "She doesn't need a better camp," Olivia had said that third evening, when Lily ran off to chase frogs and didn't look back. "She needs a better father." Nathaniel had wanted to argue. To list the gifts, the private schooling, the future he'd mapped. But the words stuck, because somewhere inside, he feared she was right. He stayed longer. Joined a group hike. Shared burnt marshmallows. Watched his daughter build a raft and lead her team across the lake. She was fearless. Beautiful. Alive. And he began to remember what it felt like to breathe outside of a boardroom. One afternoon, they sat by the fire pit as twilight crept in. Lily was quiet, twirling a twig in her hands. Nathaniel asked her how camp was going. "Better without phones," she said. People talk more. Laugh more. Remember stuff. Like what? She looked up. Like how to look at someone. Really look. He swallowed hard. That night, he couldn't sleep. He wandered the camp trails under the moonlight, lost in thoughts heavier than any quarterly report. And then came the storm. It swept in faster than expected, a curtain of black swallowing the sky. Olivia rounded up the campers. They were all accounted for. Except two. Lily. And another boy. Nathaniel didn't wait. He grabbed a flashlight, a raincoat, his fear. And he ran. Past the cabins. Through the trees. Into the night. Until he found them. Until she whispered those words. They returned to camp soaked and silent. The boy was taken to the nurse's cabin. Lily went straight to her bunk. Nathaniel stood in the downpour long after the others dispersed. He didn't notice Olivia approach until she handed him a towel. "You found them," she said. "She thinks I came too late." Olivia didn't flinch. "Did you?" He didn't answer. The next morning, he knocked on Lily's cabin door. She sat on the edge of her bed, braiding a friendship bracelet. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded, barely. He sat beside her, unsure how to begin. "I didn't mean to come late. I didn't know what you needed." "I never needed a perfect dad," she said, still braiding. "I just needed you to show up." His breath caught. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a wet, crumpled photo. A picture from when she was 6. Her first science fair. He'd missed it for a merger. "I kept this with me," he said. "To remind myself of what I lost." She looked at it, then at him. "So don't lose anything else." He nodded. "I won't." And for the first time, she leaned into him. Not because he was rich. Not because he had come to save her. But because, finally, he had come home. 6 weeks before the storm, before the whisper that shattered him, before the flashlight cut through the forest darkness to reveal her soaked, trembling form beside a boy in pain, 6 weeks before all of that, he had walked into the Golden Maple Diner like he always did on Thursdays. Elliot Sinclair, the CEO of Sinclair Tech and a man whose name could shake boardrooms and make stocks rise or fall, had come not for food, but for silence. For the familiar smell of burnt coffee. For the seat near the window that overlooked nothing important. For the anonymity he craved but never quite achieved. He wore his loneliness like a second suit, pressed, expensive, and perfectly tailored. He never spoke much. Just ordered a black coffee, read a few pages of something he wouldn't finish, and left a tip too large for what he consumed. The waitress had noticed him weeks ago, but he barely noticed her. Or maybe he did, but chose not to. Either way, they never really spoke. Until that day. The day it rained harder than usual. The diner was half empty, the air buzzing with the sound of the storm outside and a faulty ceiling fan spinning like it was clinging to life. She stood behind the counter, wiping down a mug when he walked in, soaked to the bone, without an umbrella for once. His suit clung to his frame, and for the first time, he looked less like a king and more like a man who had wandered too far from his kingdom. "You look like you lost a bet with the sky," she said, her voice soft, teasing. It startled him. Not the words. The kindness. He looked at her, really looked, maybe for the first time. Her name tag said Emily. Her eyes said more. Something about them reminded him of a song he couldn't place. A memory he couldn't reach. "Maybe I did," he replied, his voice rough like gravel but hiding something gentler beneath. She poured him coffee before he asked. No cream. No sugar. She just knew. He blinked at the cup like it had told him a secret. He sat in his usual spot but found himself watching her as she worked. Not in a leering way. Not even consciously, at first. just a soft pull. Like a thread had been tied between them and the storm outside had yanked it taut. "Rough day?" she asked when she came to check on his refill. He nodded, unsure how to answer. What did he say? That his board had threatened a vote of no confidence. That he hadn't slept in 3 nights. That his daughter, the only light in his life, had started asking questions about her mother he couldn't bear to answer. Instead, he said, "I missed my turn. Ended up here by mistake." She smiled. It wasn't pitying. It wasn't flirty. It was something in between. Sometimes mistakes lead us exactly where we need to be. It sounded too much like a line, but it hit too deep to be one. He didn't respond. He couldn't. A few minutes passed. The diner emptied further. The storm didn't let up. And when the power flickered, she brought him a candle without being asked. Its flame flickered wildly, dancing in his reflection on the window. "Do you ever wonder what people see when they look at you?" she asked quietly, not expecting an answer. He did answer. "I hope they see less than what's there." And for the first time, she didn't respond with words. She just sat across from him, for no more than 2 minutes, in silence. No judgment. No expectation. Just presence. He left that night without finishing his coffee. But he left something else behind, a folded napkin with the faintest imprint of a note. It read, "Thank you for seeing me." He didn't sign it. He didn't have to. Emily found it after her shift. She read it once. Then again. Then tucked it into her apron like it mattered. Like it meant more than she wanted it to. She didn't know who he really was. Didn't know his net worth or his boardroom battles. But she knew that on that rainy night, something cracked in his carefully constructed armor. And maybe something cracked in hers, too. The next Thursday, he didn't come. Nor the one after. She told herself she didn't care. That he was just a customer. But she checked the door more often. Poured an extra coffee some nights. Left the candle on the counter a little longer. Until 6 weeks later. When a summer camp registration error sent a powerful man to the wrong place. And he saw her again, but this time not in a diner. She stood under the shade of pine trees, clipboard in hand, sun in her hair, shouting instructions to kids as they ran past laughing. She was still Emily, but now she wore boots instead of sneakers, purpose instead of exhaustion. He didn't know what shocked him more. That she was here. Or that she hadn't forgotten him. And when he approached her, she looked up, straight into his eyes, and said the words that would begin to unravel everything he thought he understood. "So, Mr. Sinclair, still chasing storms, or finally ready to stand in one?" He froze. Because it wasn't just recognition in her voice. It was something heavier. Something older. Regret. Hope. And something that felt too much like a beginning. Except they were already deep into the story. And he had no idea how much of it he'd already forgotten. Rain battered the windows of the mountain infirmary, a rhythmic tap-tap-tap that echoed like the ticking of a countdown. Olivia stood just outside the room, her hand hovering near the door handle, unable to shake the chill settling into her bones. Inside, Nathaniel sat on the edge of a stiff cot, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. His shirt was soaked, stained with rain and the grime of the forest. But he felt nothing. He heard the whisper again, even though she had only said it once. "You came too late." 3 words, barely audible, yet loud enough to detonate something inside him. Lily hadn't meant them to hurt. She had said them as a fact, in the quiet aftermath of rescue. But to Nathaniel, they shattered everything he thought he had finally pieced together. He gritted his teeth, trying to block out the memory. But it replayed on a cruel loop, her shivering body, the fear in her eyes, the cracked tone of her voice as she clutched the injured boy and refused to look at him. She had saved that boy. She had taken charge when no one else did. Just like he should have. Just like he didn't. The door creaked open, and Olivia entered without asking. You should change. You'll catch something. She didn't even look at me, Nathaniel muttered. Olivia crossed her arms. She looked. Just not in the way you expected. He turned to her, eyes bloodshot. What do you mean? I mean she expected you to come. But not to save her. She wanted you to be there before she ever needed saving. That's the difference. Nathaniel let out a bitter laugh, one without humor. So I failed twice. Once by not being there. Twice by trying too late. Failure isn't coming late. It's not coming back at all. And you did. He didn't respond. His hands were trembling now, and he hated it. He had faced million-dollar negotiations, courtroom battles, and global investors. But the quiet disappointment in his daughter's voice had undone him completely. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph again. Olivia had seen it earlier but said nothing. Now, she took a step closer. That her mother? He nodded slowly. The only picture we ever took. The night we met. A summer storm, just like this one. Olivia frowned. She looks young. She was. Nathaniel's voice cracked. And I didn't even know her name at first. Just that she was real. So painfully real, in a world where everything felt fake. He held up the photo. The woman in the image had a crooked smile and wore a damp hoodie. Her hair clung to her face, but her eyes were alight with something defiant. Something hopeful. We spent one night together, he continued. Not like that. We just talked. We laughed. She told me about how she'd grown up in foster care. How she didn't believe in forever. I promised her I'd change her mind. And then I left. Why? Because I was a coward. Because I thought one night wouldn't matter. Because I was building an empire, and I didn't know how to build anything else. Olivia didn't speak. She just let the silence hold its weight. And then I saw her again, Nathaniel whispered. At the diner. She was different. Stronger. But she didn't tell me. Not that she was pregnant. Not that she'd kept my child. He stood and moved to the window, watching the lightning split the sky. I don't deserve either of them. Olivia's voice was calm. No parent feels like they do. But they show up anyway. That's what makes the difference. He turned to her. Do you think I can fix this? No. I think you can try. And that matters more. Down the hall, the door creaked open again. Lily stood there, wrapped in a too large hoodie, her arms crossed. Her eyes met his, not with anger, but exhaustion. Can we talk? She asked. He nodded and stepped aside. Olivia left quietly. Lily sat in the chair across from the cot, the storm still raging outside. Is he okay? The boy? Nathaniel asked. He'll be fine. Just a sprain. I kept the pressure off his leg until they came. You were incredible. She didn't respond to the compliment. Her voice was flat. You used to tell people what to do all the time. Tonight, you listened. Nathaniel swallowed. I should have done it sooner. Yes. But you're here now. A beat passed between them. A breath held in history. Do you remember her? Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't need to ask who. He nodded slowly. Every day. Then why didn't you come back? His throat closed. Because I thought I was poison. Because I thought she deserved better than a man like me. And by the time I realized I was wrong, she was gone. Lily reached into her pocket and pulled something out. A bracelet. Frayed. Red thread. She kept this by her bed every night, she said. told me it reminded her that not all promises are empty. Nathaniel took it in his hands. The thread trembled like it remembered something too. I never forgot her, he said. But I didn't know about you. Not until I saw your face that night at the campfire. And everything in me said, she looks just like her. Lily bit her lip. Do you want to know what I whispered when you found us? He nodded. You came too late, she said again. But I didn't mean just tonight. I meant for everything. The birthdays. The school plays. The nights she cried and said she wished you'd never disappeared. Nathaniel bent forward, head in his hands. I don't want your money, she continued. I don't want you to make up for lost time with gifts or donations. I want to know if you can sit with me through the silence. If you can be there when I fall and don't want to be helped. If you can come back, even when I don't ask. His voice cracked. I can. I will. If you'll let me. She looked at him then, really looked. And for the first time, he didn't see judgment. Only pain. And a door slightly ajar. Then start by not running this time, she said. And maybe, just maybe, you won't be too late again. Outside, the rain slowed. Somewhere in the distance, the storm began to break. But inside, something more powerful than weather began to shift. A bridge, once burned, began to rebuild. Not with grand gestures. But with presence. With truth. And with the kind of love that shows up even after the damage is done. He didn't reach for her hand. Not yet. But he stayed. And she stayed too. And sometimes, staying is the loudest kind of love there is. Rain fell gently now, like the storm had wept its last tear. The forest was hushed, damp earth soaking in silence as the last rays of sunlight pierced through the scattered clouds. Nathaniel stood by the lake, the same one where he had failed the survival test days before, but now it looked different. Or perhaps, he was the one who had changed. In his arms, the boy still slept, a rough bandage around his ankle, small breaths rising and falling softly. Lily sat nearby, her back to him, arms wrapped around her knees. Her hoodie was soaked, her curls clung to her cheeks, and she hadn't said a word since the rescue. He had carried that boy through the storm, over roots and mud, past fear and shame. But nothing weighed heavier than Lily's silence. He stepped forward. Lily, he called softly. She didn't turn. You came too late. The word struck harder than any branch, more brutal than any thunderclap. He stopped, his mouth open, then closed again. There was no defense against that kind of truth. I know, he whispered. But I came. Finally, she turned. Her eyes were rimmed red but fierce. I needed you before the storm. I needed you when I stood alone, when I pitched the tent by myself, when I fell and got up without a hand. You came when I didn't need saving. Just someone who would stand beside me. He dropped to his knees, the forest floor soaking his jeans. I failed you. Again and again. But tonight, when I thought I might lose you, I saw everything clearly. I don't want to be the man who's always too late. I want to be your father. Lily studied him for a long moment. Her gaze wasn't angry now. Just tired. Like a soldier too young for battle, but who had carried the war in her chest for far too long. You always tell people what to do, she said. But you don't know how to listen. You say you love me, but you don't even see me. Nathaniel nodded, swallowing hard. Then let me start now. Show me who you are. I'll listen. They sat there for minutes that felt like lifetimes. Eventually, Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out a wrinkled piece of paper. She unfolded it slowly and handed it to him. It was a drawing. Crude, childlike. A stick figure of a man in a suit. A little girl. And the words, my dad, maybe. Nathaniel's throat closed. You drew this? She nodded. 2 years ago. Why the maybe? He asked, voice breaking. She looked away. Because I wasn't sure if I ever really had one. He folded the drawing gently, like it was sacred. He tucked it into his jacket pocket, close to his heart. You do now, he said. They sat in silence, the air filled only with the sounds of the forest recovering. Then Lily spoke again. That boy you carried? Yeah. His name is Drew. He has asthma. And his parents forgot to pack his meds. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Thank you for not leaving him behind. Lily looked at him, a sliver of softness returning to her eyes. You didn't either. The next morning, sunlight poured over the camp like a new beginning. Nathaniel stood outside the main cabin, dressed in his now permanently stained jeans and a camp t-shirt Olivia had tossed at him with a smirk. Lily emerged from their shared cabin, her curls finally brushed, her smile uncertain. You ready for breakfast? He asked. She shrugged. If it's not powdered eggs again. He chuckled. Can't promise anything. As they walked together toward the mess hall, Olivia stood waiting. She didn't say much. Just raised an eyebrow and tossed Nathaniel a second t-shirt. For next year, she said. He caught it. Smiled. I might just come back. Lily snorted. You barely survived this time. Well, he said, looking down at her. I had a good teacher. The week ended not with fanfare but with hugs, handshakes, and 100 Polaroids. Parents promised to stay in touch. Kids exchanged numbers with names scrawled on arms. And when it was time to leave, Nathaniel and Lily stood at the edge of the forest road, their car packed and dusty. Before getting in, Lily turned to look back. This was the best mistake you ever made. He nodded. The best thing I never planned. They drove away from the camp, father and daughter, still learning each other's rhythms. But this time, with no silence between them. That night, back in the city, Nathaniel sat by Lily's bedside, reading the note she'd written him before they left. Dear Dad. You didn't come when I first called. But you came when it mattered. That's enough for me. Love. Lily. He looked at her sleeping form, the peaceful rise and fall of her breath, and something inside him shifted forever. He didn't just want to be her provider. He wanted to be her shelter. Her safe place. Her always. And now, he finally was.